When the gang member threatened his young apprentice, the old barber stepped forward. His hands weren't holding scissors anymore. They were positioning themselves the way they had in Afghanistan 20 years ago. Welcome to One Human One Story. Before we tell this incredible story, have you ever been to a barber whose steady hands made you wonder what else they had done in life? Write in the comments. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit subscribe. Mario's barbershop sat on the corner of Division Street and Ashland Avenue in Chicago's Wicker Park neighborhood. The red, white, and blue striped pole outside had been spinning for 32 years. Inside the small shop, time seemed frozen in 1985. Black and white checkered floors, red leather chairs that had seen better decades, mirrors with silver edges that reflected not just faces, but stories. The walls were covered with faded photographs of customers' baseball teams and a single American flag that Mario straightened every morning when he opened. Mario Delacroix was 58 years old, with salt and pepper hair that he cut himself every Sunday morning. His hands were weathered but steady, his movements precise and economical. He spoke with a slight accent that customers couldn't quite place. Some thought it was Italian because of his name. Others detected something else, something that spoke of distant places and languages learned under pressure. Every morning, Mario arrived at exactly 7 a.m. He would unlock the heavy wooden door, flip the sign from closed to open, and begin his ritual. First, he would clean his tools. Each scissor, each razor, each comb received individual attention. Then he would arrange them in perfect rows on the counter beside his chair. The precision was remarkable. Every instrument had its exact place, and Mario never deviated from the system. Regular customers knew not to rush Mario. He worked at his own pace with an attention to detail that bordered on obsessive. A haircut that might take another barber 15 minutes took Mario 30, but the results were flawless. Every line was perfect, every angle calculated. No hair was ever out of place when Mario was finished. The neighborhood had changed dramatically over the years. Young professionals had moved in. Coffee shops and boutiques replaced hardware stores and family restaurants. Property values soared. Many of the old businesses closed, unable to afford the rising rents. But Mario's barbershop remained. The landlord, Mr. Chen, had never raised Mario's rent, not once, in 32 years. When people asked why Mr. Chen would always smile and say Mario is a good man, a very good man, but he never explained further. Mario had never asked for the special treatment, and Mr. Chen had never offered an explanation. Some arrangements exist without words between men who understand sacrifice. Mario lived alone in a small apartment above the barbershop. No family photos decorated his walls. No personal mementos cluttered his tables. The space was sparse, functional. A bed, a kitchen table, a single chair. Books lined one wall. Military histories, biographies, accounts of wars in places most people couldn't pronounce, but Mario could pronounce them. He had been to some of those places. The only decoration in his apartment was a shadow box hanging above his bed. Inside were 3 items: a set of dog tags worn smooth by time, a small American flag folded in a precise triangle, and a single medal that caught the light when the sun hit it just right. Mario never looked at the shadow box directly, but he knew it was there. Every night when he went to sleep, and every morning when he woke up, he felt its weight. Carlos Rivera had been working as Mario's apprentice for 8 months. He was 19 years old, trying to learn a trade that would keep him out of trouble. The gang members in the neighborhood had been recruiting him since he was 14. His older brother Miguel had joined the Latin Kings when he was 16. Now Miguel was serving 8 years in Stateville for armed robbery. Carlos didn't want to follow that path. He had seen what gang life did to his friends. Some were dead, others were in prison. The smart ones had left the neighborhood entirely, but Carlos couldn't leave. His mother worked 2 jobs to support his younger sisters. Someone had to be around to help. Someone had to make sure the girls stayed in school and away from the streets. Mario had hired Carlos against the advice of other business owners in the area. The kid has potential, they said, but he's from a bad family. His brother is a gang member. You can't trust him. But Mario saw something in Carlos that others missed. The young man's hands were steady. His attention to detail was remarkable for someone his age. Most importantly, he listened. He followed instructions exactly. He never took shortcuts. For 8 months, Carlos had swept floors, cleaned tools, and watched Mario work. Slowly, Mario began teaching him the basics: How to hold scissors properly, how to judge the natural fall of hair, how to read a customer's face to understand what they really wanted, even when they couldn't articulate it themselves. Carlos was a fast learner. His first attempts at cutting hair were clumsy but showed promise. Mario was patient, correcting mistakes without criticism, teaching by example rather than lecture. The old barber had developed his own philosophy about training. You don't make someone good by pointing out what they do wrong. You make them good by showing them how to do it right. The trouble started on a Tuesday afternoon in October. Chicago's wind was cutting through the streets, carrying the first hint of winter. The barber shop was quiet. Mario was reading a book about the war in Afghanistan, while Carlos practiced cutting techniques on a mannequin head. The bell above the door chimed and 3 young men entered. Carlos recognized them immediately. Tony Vasquez and his crew, local drug dealers who controlled several blocks around the shop. Tony was 25 years old, with prison tattoos covering his neck and hands. His 2 associates, Diego and Flaco, were younger, but equally dangerous. They weren't customers. They had come for a different reason. Tony approached the counter where Carlos was working. His movements were casual but purposeful, like a predator that had already selected its prey. "Yo, Carlos," he said, his voice carrying false friendliness. "We need to talk." Carlos set down his scissors and straightened. His hands were trembling slightly, but he kept his voice steady. "I'm working, Tony. Can we do this later?" "Nah, man. This can't wait." Tony glanced around the shop, taking in the vintage decorations, the old photographs, the American flag. "This is a nice place you got here. Would be a shame if something happened to it." Mario looked up from his book. His expression remained calm, but his posture had changed slightly. He was no longer relaxed. Every muscle in his body was coiled like a spring waiting for release. "Gentlemen," he said quietly, "can I help you with something?" Tony turned toward Mario, sizing him up. "Just some old barber. Nothing to worry about." "Yeah, you can help. You can mind your own business while me and Carlos have a conversation." "This is my shop," Mario replied, setting his book aside. "Everything that happens here is my business." Tony laughed, showing gold teeth. "Your shop, huh? Well, let me explain something to you, old man. This whole neighborhood belongs to us. Every business pays protection. Every worker shows respect. Your boy Carlos here has been avoiding his obligations." Carlos stepped forward. "I told you before, Tony. I'm not interested. I have a job. I'm learning a trade." "A trade?" Diego laughed. "Cutting hair. That's not a real job. That's something for old men who can't do nothing else." Mario stood up slowly. His movements were fluid, economical, like someone who had learned to conserve energy for when it was needed most. "Carlos is my employee," he said. "He's under my protection." "Your protection," Tony repeated. He looked at Mario more carefully this time, taking in the older man's posture, his balance, the way his hands hung loose at his side. "And what exactly are you going to do to protect him?" "Whatever is necessary," Mario replied. The atmosphere in the shop had changed. What had started as casual intimidation was becoming something more serious. Tony's associates moved to flank Mario, cutting off potential escape routes. But Mario didn't look like a man planning to escape. He looked like a man calculating angles, measuring distances, evaluating threats. "See, here's the thing," Tony continued, his voice hardening. "Carlos owes us. His family lives in our territory. They use our protection. They benefit from our services. That means Carlos works for us, not for some washed-up old barber who don't know when to keep his mouth shut." Carlos tried to intervene. "Tony, please. I'll talk to you later. After work. We don't need to do this here." "Too late for that," Tony said. "Way too late." He reached inside his jacket and pulled out a switchblade. The blade snapped open with a metallic click that echoed through the small shop. "Maybe you need a lesson in respect, both of you." That's when Mario moved. The transformation was instantaneous. The mild-mannered barber disappeared, replaced by someone else entirely. Someone who had learned to move with lethal precision under circumstances where hesitation meant death. In one fluid motion, Mario stepped forward, grabbed Tony's wrist with his left hand, and delivered a precise strike to his elbow with his right. The sound of breaking bone was distinct. Tony screamed and dropped the knife. Mario caught it before it hit the floor. The entire sequence took less than 2 seconds. Diego reached for something in his waistband, but Mario was already turning. The knife flew through the air with perfect accuracy, embedding itself in the wooden doorframe exactly 1 inch from Diego's head. The young man froze his hand, still reaching for his weapon. "Don't," Flaco started to say, but Mario silenced him with a look. The old barber's eyes had changed. They were no longer gentle or patient. They were the eyes of someone who had seen death up close, someone who had delivered it when necessary. "You have 30 seconds to leave my shop," Mario said quietly. "All of you. If you ever come back, if you ever threaten Carlos again, if you even look at this place wrong, you'll discover what I learned in the mountains of Afghanistan." Tony was on his knees, clutching his broken arm. His face was pale with shock and pain. "You crazy old man," he gasped. "You have no idea who you're messing with." Mario knelt beside him. His voice was barely above a whisper, but every word carried absolute certainty. "I know exactly who I'm messing with. 3 wannabe tough guys who think carrying weapons makes them dangerous. I've killed men who were 10 times more dangerous than you. Men who were trained by professionals. Men who knew how to fight and die for something bigger than themselves." He stood up and walked to the doorframe. With one quick motion, he yanked the knife free and held it up to the light. The blade was perfectly balanced, weighted for throwing. Tony looked at it, and his eyes widened with a new understanding of what he was facing. 20 seconds, Mario said. Diego and Flaco helped Tony to his feet. The injured man was still clutching his arm, but his expression had changed from anger to fear. As they stumbled toward the door, Tony turned back. "This ain't over," he said. Mario didn't respond. He simply stood there holding the knife, watching them leave. After they were gone, he locked the door and flipped the sign to closed. His hands were steady. His breathing was normal, as if nothing unusual had happened. Carlos was staring at him with a mixture of awe and confusion. Mario, who was that? What just happened here? Mario returned to his chair and picked up his book. "That was someone I used to be," he said. "Someone I hoped I'd never have to be again. But you're just a barber," Carlos said. "You cut hair, you sweep floors, you read books about military history." Mario looked at him steadily. "I am a barber, Carlos, but I wasn't always a barber. 20 years ago, I was Staff Sergeant Mario Delacroix, United States Army Rangers. Sniper, 37 confirmed kills in Afghanistan and Iraq." The words hung in the air like smoke. Carlos sat down heavily in the customer chair. His mind was racing, trying to reconcile the gentle man who had been teaching him to cut hair with the lethal precision he had just witnessed. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Carlos asked. "Because it's not who I am anymore," Mario replied. "I came home from my 3rd deployment and I was done. Done with killing, done with violence, done with being someone whose job was to end lives. I wanted to do something that made people feel better about themselves, something that brought a little dignity to their day." He set down his book and looked around the shop. "This place saved me, Carlos. Learning to cut hair, learning to listen to people's stories, learning to make them look good. It gave me a purpose that didn't involve a rifle scope." "But you're still trained," Carlos said. "You could still do those things. Training never leaves you," Mario admitted. "It's like muscle memory. In a dangerous situation, your body remembers what to do, even when your mind wants to forget. But I made a choice when I came home. I chose to build instead of destroy, to serve people in a different way." Carlos was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "What happens now?" "Tony and his crew, they'll be back. They'll bring more people." Mario walked to the window and looked out at the street. "Maybe," he said, "but they'll think twice before they threaten someone under my protection again. Men like that understand strength. They respect violence even when they fear it. Sometimes that's the only language they speak." He turned back to Carlos. "But that doesn't mean you're safe. They know where you live. They know your family. You need to be careful." "I can't leave the neighborhood," Carlos said. "My mother, my sisters, they need me here." "I'm not asking you to leave," Mario replied. "I'm asking you to be smart. Stay alert. Don't go anywhere alone. And keep learning. The better you get at this trade, the more options you'll have." Over the following weeks, the barbershop returned to its normal rhythm. Mario continued teaching Carlos the finer points of cutting hair. Regular customers came and went unaware of what had happened. The only visible change was that Mario had installed a security camera above the door and added a second lock. Tony and his crew stayed away. Word had spread through the neighborhood about the old barber who had broken a gang member's arm and thrown a knife with deadly accuracy. Some people whispered about Mario's military service. Others speculated about what other secrets he might be hiding, but no one asked him directly. In a neighborhood where everyone had secrets, respect was earned by not asking too many questions. Carlos threw himself into learning the trade with renewed dedication. He practiced constantly, perfecting his technique, studying Mario's methods. The young man had found something worth protecting, not just his own future, but the shop that had become his sanctuary. One evening, as they were closing up, Carlos asked Mario about the war. What was it like being a sniper? Mario was cleaning his tools with the same precise ritual he performed every day. It was lonely, he said finally. You spend hours, days, sometimes watching, waiting for the perfect shot. You learn patience in ways most people never will. You learn to control your breathing, your heartbeat, your emotions. Everything has to be perfect or people die. Did you ever regret it? Carlos asked. Every day, Mario replied, but not for the reasons you might think. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that there are people in the world who choose violence over peace, but I don't regret doing my job. Good men died because I was there to protect them. That has to count for something. He finished cleaning his scissors and placed them in their designated spot. The precision is what I brought to this work, he said. The patience, the attention to detail, the understanding that small mistakes can have big consequences. In Afghanistan, a millimeter could mean the difference between saving a life and taking the wrong one. Here it means the difference between a good haircut and a great one. Carlos smiled at that. So cutting hair is like being a sniper. In some ways, yes, Mario said. Both require steady hands. Both require you to see what others miss. Both require you to care about getting it exactly right. The difference is one creates and one destroys. I prefer creating. 3 months later, Tony Vasquez was arrested in a drug bust. His crew scattered, some leaving the neighborhood, others finding different ways to make money. Carlos continued his apprenticeship, eventually becoming skilled enough to take customers of his own. He never forgot the lesson he learned that October afternoon, that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who look harmless, that real strength doesn't advertise itself, that the best warriors are often the ones who choose not to fight. Mario continued cutting hair with the same precision and patience he had always shown. Customers appreciated his attention to detail, his willingness to listen, his ability to make them look their best. Most had no idea about his military service. They saw only a skilled craftsman who took pride in his work. But Carlos knew, and occasionally when a difficult customer became too demanding or a situation in the shop grew tense, Carlos would glance at Mario and remember what those steady hands were capable of. It was reassuring to know that behind the gentle exterior was someone who would stand up for what was right, someone who had chosen to serve in a different way, but had never forgotten how to protect those who needed protecting. Mario Delacroix never talked about Afghanistan. He never displayed his medals or told war stories. He simply showed up every morning at 7 a.m., unlocked his shop, and began another day of making people look good. The precision that had once been a matter of life and death now created perfect haircuts. The patience that had allowed him to wait motionless for hours now helped him listen to customers' stories. The steady hands that had once held a rifle now held scissors. Some transformations are dramatic. Others happen quietly over years. Mario had chosen the quiet path, from warrior to craftsman, from destroyer to creator. But the skills remain. The training never left. And when someone he cared about was threatened, the old soldier emerged just long enough to restore the peace. So I ask you, have you ever met someone whose gentle exterior hid a more complicated past? Have you encountered a person whose skills seemed to come from experience they never talked about? Tell us their story in the comments, because here at One Human One Story, we believe that the most interesting people are often the ones who keep their deepest truths hidden. Sometimes the barber who gives you a perfect haircut learned precision under very different circumstances. Sometimes the person who seems ordinary has an extraordinary story they choose not to tell. And sometimes the greatest warriors are the ones who put down their weapons and pick up scissors instead. If this story moved you, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that heroes come in many forms. We'll see you in the next story. And until then, remember that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Treat them with kindness. You never know what they've survived to be standing there with you.